Okay, we are going to be live in a minute. Hello.
Hello.
So it's another wonderful interview, and here I am, Mel Rosenberg, your host for the New Books Network, NBN, and I'm here interviewing yet another remarkable Canadian, or Canadienne, as the case may be. Anne Renaud, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and good morning. I understand that for you it's good evening, but here in Montreal it's pretty much good morning.
Well, good morning and good evening. The sun has gone down here in Israel, but as you know, I'm a Canadian by birth, and I grew up in Ottawa. So
Hmm.
next time you're on the show, bring some snow, and we can.
Oh, we've got a lot of that right now.
We have in Jerusalem. We have some snow. Anyway, we're here to talk about you, your life, and your recent book, which is called Gwendolyn's Pet Garden,
Hmm.
and it was just released a few months ago.
It was
Eh,
released in May by Nancy Polson Books, which is
yes,
an imprint of
yes.
Penguin. Yeah.
That's remarkable. You've done some wonderful books with Kids Can Press out of Toronto.
Yes, Kids Can is wonderful to work with. I did The Boy Who Invented the Popsicle, the cool science behind Frank Epperson's famous frozen treat.
The Cool
And
Science, was that your pun?
the cool science, I love alliteration, but it was their suggestion actually to include science experiments, which I thought was brilliant. They also did The True Tale of a Giantess, the story of Anna Swan, who happens to be a Canadian giant. And the third one was, and this is the Japanese version because I ran out of the English, which is Mr. Crumb's Potato Predicament, which is based on the story of George Crum, who is some people credit with the invention of the potato chip.
Yeah, some people credit him with the invention of crisps,
Yes,
depending
exactly.
on where you live. And in
Yes.
Japan, potato chips are komushakwai.
Oh, really?
I have no idea. Um, I apologize to all my Japanese listeners. Um, I once called a woman a cucumber in Tokyo. Um, so anyway, so tell us a little bit about Gwendolyn's pet garden, which I think is a remarkable idea.
Thank you.
You talk. I'll shut up.
Okay. Well, Gwendolyn's Pet Garden, the inspiration, like many of my books actually, came from one of my nieces, Emma, who desperately wants a pet. And because she has allergies and for a number of other reasons, she can't. Like her parents said, that's simply not going to happen. So I wanted to find a happy alternative for her. And I suspected that there were other children who were in the same situation, children who live in apartment buildings that don't allow pets. And so for me, I thought, well, if she were given either a plant or a little patch of earth that she could, in which she could plant seeds, perhaps that could become her pet. And so that essentially was the motivation for and the inspiration for Gwendolyn's Pet Garden.
Okay, and sorry.
Yes, and also the fact that in the story there is a mention of a seed lending library, which I think is very innovative, and so I wanted to introduce that to young readers also, and to encourage them if their community doesn't have a seed lending library, to perhaps approach either their own library or a store that sells seeds in adding that to the services that they have.
So a seed lending library, it's a good thing. It's not seeds for animals.
No, it's seeds for plants.
That's a good thing. Here's your elephant back. So I didn't know those existed. So you can go to a library and get seeds. And what happens after they grow?
Well, essentially, a seed lending library um, operates on the honor system. So you will go to the library and they will give you seeds and you will plant them. And then when your own plants grow and you harvest them, then you can take seeds from those plants and return them to the library so that that way it is self-sustaining. And that's essentially the principle of a seed lending library.
Well, that's remarkable. Sometimes the seeds need to be treated though before they can be grown.
Possibly, I'm not aware of,
When
but
I was
that's
when I was a kid in Ottawa, I tried to grow watermelons
yes.
from watermelon seeds in the winter.
Oh, okay.
This was my first failed experiment as an inventor.
I see.
I did get it right. It took 50 years. But anyway, so this is all incredible. How long did it take you to write it? How many versions did you write? How did you find this amazing publisher?
Well, I would say that the idea, the seed of the story, I had it for a number of months. And then I wasn't quite sure, okay, would she be handed a plant? Would she be handed a parcel of land? And so it took, I would say, probably 6 to 8 months. And then in terms of finding the great publisher, I had submitted Gwendolyn's Pet Garden to an agent here in Canada, and she really liked the story, and so she agreed to represent me and to then submit the story to a number of publishers in Canada and the United States.
You're allowed to mention your agent and be proud of.
Well, oh, I'm very proud of her, but she's no longer my agent. I now have a new agent.
In that
And that's
case,
okay. That sometimes happens.
okay.
But she was wonderful. But now I do have a new wonderful agent. So essentially that agent circulated it, and Nancy Polson of Nancy Polson Books really liked it, and she negotiated a great contract for me. And so that was my first agented work, because up until then I had published a number of books with Canadian publishers and one American publisher, but I had submitted them on my own. I hadn't been represented until then.
Okay, so you don't want to mention the agent who made this
Oh,
wonderful
it was
deal?
Hilary McMahon. Yes, the one who did the deal is Hilary McMahon. She's a great agent, and she works in Toronto. She's with an agency in Toronto. And right now I'm with another agent who's also in Toronto, because Toronto is sort of like Mecca for Canadian publishing, for Canadian children's publishing, the same way New York is in the United States. And I'm with Olga Filina, who started a new agency with two other agents. And so Olga's been representing me for almost a year now.
Wonderful. That's great. So do you have any secrets? Anything coming out that you want to divulge now?
Sure. I have there should be 3 books coming out in 2022. And 2 of them are in French, because as you know, I write in French as well as in English. And there is one who is coming out, that should be coming out this year, with another American publisher, which Olga negotiated the contract with, called Raycraft, and it's yes, and they're doing another picture book biography, because I've done a few picture book biographies, and so they really liked a story that we pitched to them about this Frenchman who literally built a castle with his bare hands in France, and he is known, or he's considered by many, as the father of naive art. much in the same style as Gaudi. And so yes, and that book, I'm really looking forward to seeing it, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, they contracted an illustrator from Romania, and I saw the pencil drawings and they're great. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the finished product.
That's so wonderful. Sometimes they don't show the authors the pictures at all before they're finished.
No, but I have that written in my contract.
Ah,
Because I'm a bit of a control freak, and I like to, and I admit I'm a control freak. And most of publishers really are quite happy to do that, so that I can see the pencil drawings before color is added, because once color is added, it's more difficult to change an illustration. But I get to see the line drawings, and then sort of the first drafts. And I comment on those, and then they come back with a more finalized version of the illustrations months later. So yes, I do have that in my contract, and I also have because, as you know, it's usually the publisher that chooses the illustrator. I mean, I can certainly suggest, and that publisher has the last word, but I also have it in my contract that I'm part of I guess, the selection process, if you want. And again, publishers are very open. Most publishers are fine with that, because they appreciate, having the input. But after that, I never really get to meet the illustrator unless they live in Montreal, or have any contact with them, because it's the editor that's the point person, and everything is filtered through the editor.
so that's quite unusual, and you are unusual in the sense that you do appreciate that out of thousands and thousands of people who want to write for children, very few get contracts, very few have multiple books under their belt, very few have wonderful agents. And so you are maybe not 1 in a million, but let's say 1 in half a million. And it's important for my listeners to appreciate that the people I'm interviewing are really, really, really super special.
Oh, that's very kind, Mal.
But my next question is, how did that happen?
How did that happen? Well,
How did that happen?
Exactly. I think the first rule of writing for children is that rejection is a very, very big part of this process. But if you are okay with that, and if you persevere, because I think that's really the key, is to just keep on plugging away at it. Like so many people at the beginning, when I started writing, I wrote my manuscripts, I sent them out. I collected enough rejection letters to wallpaper a room. I mean, it was just, that's all I got. But what really kept me going is I then started submitting to magazines, children's magazines. And because a lot of it is supply and demand. So magazines, they need a lot more material than publishers. So they need fiction, nonfiction, recipes, craft projects. So I started submitting to Highlights for Kids, Spider, Cricket, all of those magazines. And lo and behold, they started accepting my work. So that in itself was tremendous validation for me, because that told me that I did have a voice, because writing is very solitary. I'm not part of a writing group. I'm not, I just would write on my own in my home, and that was it. Because everyone is sort of, well, I was very, when you're at the beginning, you're so green, you just learn as you go. But the fact that magazines were actually accepting my work, that told me that, okay, then perhaps there is a possibility that eventually I will end up with a book. So there's that was happening. But also at the time, I was working for McGill University, and I was working for the AIDS Research Center. And this was in the 90s. And I knew that, and there's a book that came out written by a doctor, Margaret Merrifield, entitled, it was a kid's book entitled Come Sit By Me. And this book was about a child in a daycare who the children in the daycare, their parents did not want them to play with her. So this child was experiencing discrimination in this particular daycare. And I knew that it was just a question of time that this would happen here in Montreal. We had the highest number of AIDS cases, certainly in the province and quite possibly in the whole country, because a lot of people came to Montreal to be treated. And so when this book came out in English, I approached a French publisher and I said, I see that there's a need for this book. I will translate it if you will publish it. And they said, okay, we will do that. And so that was my sort of first, along with the writing for magazines, that was pretty much my first experience. And sure enough, it was just a few months later that this child, I mean, it was in the newspapers that this child, because she was, they had to administer AZT, which was at that time one of the only drugs available for people with AIDS. They put two and two together, and it just sort of blew up in terms of what was happening in the daycare. The parents were very, very concerned for the children. So then I started this whole program, this educational program throughout the province to go in and talk to the daycare workers. That we had nurses, and they would go in and talk to them about universal precautions and how to, what to do. And so that's sort of how I came to, publishing. And then later on, in 1995, it was the 50th anniversary of the liberation of the Netherlands. And there was tremendous coverage.
Oh, your tulip book.
Exactly. So there was tremendous coverage on the news in 1995 because so many of our veterans went back to the Netherlands to essentially to be celebrated, to mark the 50th anniversary. And I remember watching this coverage on TV and thinking, oh my God, our veterans are being honored. And they were, they were parading and they looked so proud, and children and adults were cheering them on. And I thought, how sad that these generations of kids know what Canadians did during the Second World War. And here in Canada, I certainly wasn't clued into what had gone on. And then my uncle came back because he had been part of the liberating troops, and he told me his story. And I thought, this is the story I want to tell. This is the story. I want to honor him. I want to tell the story of why we have a tulip festival and include his story within that book. So, and that book came out in 2004. Now, unfortunately, the original publisher no longer exists. But then in 2014, the Fitzhenry and Whiteside, or Whitecap actually, which is an imprint of Fitzhenry of Whiteside, they said, we want to publish it. And so we revised it and reformatted it and brought it up to date because a decade had gone on. And so it came out again. And so the book is sold every year at the Tulip Festival, and of course, Amazon and all of that. So that was my first published book.
Wonderful. And of course, as someone who grew up in Canada, in Ottawa, I can really relate to the tulips.
Yes, and I went to university for a year at Ottawa U, and my brother, he completed his degree at Ottawa U, and we had the Tulip Festival every year, and of course I never wondered why. And then when I looked into it, I thought, oh, this is fascinating. Mm-hmm. How every year we're gifted with these tulip bulbs. Well, and yeah,
at least in my generation, we knew. I knew that this was a gift from the Dutch people.
Really? Oh, because I wasn't. And when I decided to write the story, I wanted to make sure it hadn't already been done, and it hadn't been done.
Wow.
So I was, certainly it hadn't been done for kids. And so that made it all the more appealing for publishers.
Wonderful. So I want to take you back now to
Okay.
where you come from. That's also important. You're a Canadian, a real Canadian,
I'm
a
a real
real.
Canadian. Well, I think we're all real Canadians. Some of us were born here, some of us weren't.
Some of us more than others.
There you go. Yes, I was born in Quebec. I
Hmm.
was raised in the province of Quebec. And my parents, my mother is English and my father is French. So my mother tongue is English. And I went to school for primary and secondary in French. And then I switched over to English
Now,
for university and college.
in your house,
Yes,
what language did you speak to your dad in?
mainly English.
Really?
Mainly English,
He
yes.
he was born where?
He was born in Cap-la-Madeleine,
Hmm.
but he was raised in Beauharnois, which is about half an hour from Montreal.
And your
Um,
mom was born where?
my mom was, I believe she was born in Beauharnois,
Hmm.
and again, raised in Beauharnois, and that's where they met. And and so they met, they married. I was born in Valleyfield, but I was raised in Beauharnois up until the age of 10. And then we moved up north in northern Quebec because there was this town that was essentially being built. Domtar was opening up a pulp and paper mill, and so we moved up there with the black flies. And the population when I left 10 years later was 5,000. So going up when we arrived there was hardly anything.
You're a
But
Canadian pioneer, Anne.
we did. We pioneered this town in the Abitibi region,
Yeah.
and where there was literally your closest grocery store was like an hour away, and you had to, you had to fly out for everything, for doctor, whatever. I mean, eventually we did get a doctor and we did get a hospital, but our first year of schooling was actually in the pulp and paper mill because there was no school, and the nuns taught us in the pulp and paper mill. So that was, yes, that was quite the experience, but it was mainly a francophone town. And in Beauharnois, all of my friends were francophones. So if I wanted to play with anyone, I had to learn the language. And so that's how I learned the language. And then I went to francophone, I went to French school. So I learned, French grammar and all of that. But at home, we watched mostly English TV, spoke English. I read mostly English books. And so that's why I mean, we flip-flop back and forth unconsciously, really, from one language to the other. And that served me so well because I write all of my stories in English, but then I translate them into French so that I can submit them to all that many more publishers.
Incroyable. Uh, so now I'm getting to my pet theory here.
Okay.
You write for little children,
Yes.
which I think is a great. It's not a job. It's not a profession. It's some kind of mission in life to write for young people.
I think so. Yes.
But I think that those of us that write for 5-year-olds are actually stuck at the age of 5. Do you want to support this theory or to refute it? What,
Well,
what do you like at the age of 5?
I would like to partially refute it, because in my head, I'm not 5, I might be 16.
Okay.
And so in order to conduct the research that I need and the methodology that and the discipline, I would have to be a little older than 5. But I think in my heart, and there is a part of my brain that, yes, still thinks like a five, because my books, you're right, I write for either 5 to 8 year olds. And for example, in the case of the Tulip book, it's I think it's 9 to 12 year olds, because there's a lot of research that's done, and it's much more dense in terms of word count. And I bring in I bring in the Holocaust and a lot of other difficult topics that you wouldn't find necessarily in a book for 5 to 8 year olds or 3 to 5 year olds. So, but yes, there is, I think that in my heart, I am still very much a child.
Okay, so talk to me about that for a moment, if you wish.
The process of
Yeah, no,
writing.
I'll tell you why, Anne. You know, nobody is holding a gun at our heads and telling us that we have to write picture books for young children.
No, you're right. You do
It's
it out
something
of love.
we do it
Yes.
out of love and passion and volition. And
Yes.
and I think that we're trying to say something to our 5 year old. What are you trying to say to your 5 year old?
Um, well, I don't know if I'm trying to say anything to my 5 year old self. I think it helps to have part of my brain still 5 year old and part of my heart 5 year old. But you're right. We don't do it. We certainly don't do it for the money, because I could not live off of what I make. I think most of us have full-time jobs, and we do this as an aside. And the motivation, again, I think that there's a part, I want to leave a part of me behind. This essentially would be my legacy. I don't have children. I mean, I have a whole bunch of nieces who inspire me. But there are messages that I want, essentially, because to me, also writing is a creative act. And so on my website, kids ask me, well, why do you write? Well, because I really don't sing well and I don't dance well. So I try to write as well as I can. So that's the answer that I usually give them. Because it's not, I mean, sometimes it feels like root canal. It's not an easy process, but there are moments of bliss where you're sort of in the zone, and words are coming at you and you're thinking, wow, this is good. And so for those moments, I live for those moments, who are very few and far between. But as I said, it's part of the legacy. So for me, it was very, well, A Bloom of Friendship was an act of love, essentially. From my uncle, I wanted to preserve his story because I realized that once a veteran dies, if he has not imparted his stories with anyone, then those stories die with him. And so it was very important for me to preserve my uncle's story. And there are other testimonials in that book. So that there was that. And also just bringing, I want, back in the 90s, I still have this piece of paper, and I had written a sentence saying that I wanted to entertain and educate, and there was another something else, and I don't know if it was enlighten, but anyway, children with my books. And I folded that piece of paper and I kept it with me in my wallet, and I still have it today. And so, because sometimes if you put the thing, which you want out into the world, it sometimes happens. And so this is why, because I want to entertain and educate and inspire kids with my books. So if Gwendolyn's pet can be of any benefit to a child who desperately wants a pet, but for whatever reason can't, then this would be an alternative.
Or to a parent.
Or to a parent, exactly.
Who wants to explain why you can't have a Saint Bernard.
Yes, because you live in a 3.5, it's just not going to happen. And so, and also and again, I don't get a lot of fan mail, but I do get the odd email from a parent who tells me things like, oh, you've instilled the love of reading in my child. I mean, it does not get better than that.
Absolutely.
And so for all of these reasons, I guess that is why I write. So, and I don't think I'm working out any issues that, you know, I may have gone through as a child, because I do know that for a lot of authors that is a means to work out, which, you know, what they've gone through. It's very cathartic. Yes, you're an example of that.
Ask anyone I know.
There you go. But the idea of family is very present in my books, and there are books where it's to help kids who have low self-esteem, and I think we are all a bit victim of low self-esteem. I know I am, because I think if we all had, you know, so a high, if we valued ourselves a bit more.
So when you were 5 or 6 years old, do you remember having low self-esteem?
In retrospect, I think as a kid, I did have low self-esteem. Yes. And so some of my books are, again, just reminders. Oh, well, you may not be able to do this, but oh, look at all the other things that you can do. And so these are tools to raise a child's self-esteem. So that also is present.
I will take that as a yes.
Yes, yes. Yes, absolutely. And so yeah, so for Mel, for all of these reasons, because I think for each writer, their reasons are very, you know, they're personal, and they're different and they're unique. And so I know this is the long-winded version of why I write, but yes, this is why I write.
No, it's beautiful. You see, because I'm interviewing people that are successful, that have published books recently with traditional publishers, and you and I both know that this is one in a zillion, and you've published many and really beautiful books with top publishers. But the interviews have two purposes. First of all, to understand your process and your life and how you reached what you did, and also as an encouragement to other writers, that it can happen to you.
Absolutely, because I tell that's exactly what I say to people. If I can do it, you can do it. There is no reason why, if that is what you have set your mind and your heart to, then absolutely. And it's just tenacity.
Yeah, but tenacity, Anne, is like the A to Z, because as somebody who's written for decades, it's very easy to lose faith. You know, some people get rejected 3 or 4 times, and say, "Oh, you know, you can get rejected hundreds of times." I have 3 questions to ask you. What is your advice for the people who have enough rejections to fill a wall, including me?
Well, the first thing is, if you want to write for kids, you have to read kids' books. You read in the genre that you want to write in. You read anything and everything. I mean, I always have a book going, and it could be for, you know, it could be a YA, it could be for, you know, an adult novel.
Young adult.
Exactly. It could be a middle grade. It could be a picture book. I mean, I read extensively and on all kinds of topics. Know that yes, that rejection is a huge part of the process, and it's really, you have to develop a thick skin, and you have to be resilient. When I would get rejection letters, yes, I was disappointed, but I would tell myself, I am just one step closer to being published. It was always there, as a possibility. And I guess I never doubted. I didn't know when it would happen, but I had a pretty good idea that it would happen. From the moment that my first article was published, I thought, okay, then if someone recognizes that I do have a voice, then, that's good. It's very good. And I would
So
encourage people
yeah, so
to write
that's a
magazines.
terrific story because you went from the low esteem to the medium esteem.
To the medium esteem, yes.
Yeah, and
Because
that's
yes, because I think I still very much suffer from, in French, it's the syndrome de l'imposteur, which is the imposter syndrome, where
yes.
someday they're going to find out that, no, I really can't put a sentence
No, but
together.
I read a lot of children's books, and you are right up there. And so I have two requests from you. Can you please read a little bit of Gwendolyn's Pet Garden, show us
Sure.
some of the pictures, and mention the
Sure.
illustrator? And then I have one last question.
Okay. So the illustrator is Rachine Curie, brilliant New York illustrator. Who I didn't know.
Who you helped choose.
Well, actually, no. In this case, I had suggested others,
Okay.
but they came back and said, "Oh, we think Rachine would be great." And I thought, "Okay, I don't know Rachine, and they sent me a link to her portfolio, and I thought, yes, this works for me." So it was a very easy decision. So if you want, I can start from the beginning, and you tell me when you want me to stop.
Well, read a page or two so we don't get into copyright issues.
Okay, all right. So Gwendolyn Newberry Fretz wanted a pet, more than polka dotted boots, more than a telescope, more than anything. Gwendolyn grouched and pouted, pestered and pleaded, argued and bartered. But Gwendolyn's parents simply would not budge, certainly not for a pet with two legs. And here we have Gwendolyn saying, "Can I have a cockatoo? Can I have a toucan? Can I have a macaw?" "Birds throw feathery fits," said father. "Under no circumstances for a pet with four legs. Can I have a gerbil? Can I have a hedgehog? Can I have a chinchilla?" "Fur makes my nose sneeze," said mother.
And listen, I want everybody to run out and buy that book. Gwendolyn's Pet Garden. It just came out recently by Renaud. The name of the illustrator again is
Rachine Curie. She's an award-winning illustrator based in New York.
And published by the fantastic Nancy Paulson Books.
Yes, exactly. An imprint of Penguin.
And last question.
Yes.
As somebody who was once an inventor, you've written many books about inventors.
Yes, I did.
Can you just share a few sentences about that before we go? Because I'm intrigued.
Okay. Well, most of the time when I choose my topic, I think, okay, if I were a kid, what would interest me? And as a kid, I think, well, if you have inventions by kids, now that would be interesting to kids. So one that I had discovered when I was researching another topic was the invention of the popsicle by Frank Epperson, who got the idea when he was 10 or 11. And then it sort of, stayed in the back of his mind. And he then developed it when he was an adult. So there was that I thought, oh, kids are going to like this. What is there not to like? It's popsicles. It's a kid who invents it. So it has to, they'll eat that up, as we say. And then there's, this one is in French, Les Oreilles de Chester, which is Chester's ears, which is the story of Chester Greenwood, which many credit for the invention of earmuffs. Again, the idea he got when he was a kid, and he actually set up an earmuff company in his town and employed a lot of the citizens, and he popularized them. And so that's where I got that. And then of course there's Mr. Crum, who is partially based on folklore, but he's a real person. Mr. Crum really did exist.
And what I loved about that book, the book is great, but the back matter, where you come out and say, we're not sure, because many writers, they credit people based on, I don't know, Wikipedia, biographies, and so on. And as an inventor, I can tell you that it's much more complicated.
Oh, it is. Absolutely.
It's rarely one person who invented the
Exactly.
airplane, the car, the bicycle. So I was very happy to see that.
Yes, no, you're right. You have to be honest to your readers. And even at the very beginning of the book, I think it says it's this is a story that has a dollop of truth, and so the reader knows from the beginning that, well, they should take it with a grain of salt, essentially.
Oh, that potato chips.
There you go.
Okay, you know, I think that we should end the conversation on this high note. That you should take everything with a pinch of salt, and except for popsicles.
Yes.
And Renaud, it was so exciting to speak to you.
Thank you so much.
For the New Books Network, Mel Rosenberg signing off here, and wonderful to meet and to talk about you, and to talk with you about your wonderful craft.
Oh,
Thank you
thank
so
you
much.
again.
And
Thank you, Mel.
Merci beaucoup.
Ah, de rien. Ça m'a fait plaisir.
Pour moi. À tout à l'heure.
OK. Bye-bye.